The bathroom mirror was fogged with steam, but I could still see the tears sliding down my face. Tears that weren't born of sorrow this time, but of something I hadn't tasted in decades. Happiness. My trembling fingers wiped them away. Yet, more spilled, soaking the wrinkles carved deep into my cheeks after a lifetime of struggles, disappointments, and silent sacrifices. For 69 years, I had been the dutiful wife, the careful mother, the responsible neighbour. My life was a patchwork quilt sewn from everyone else's needs. First, it was my husband's dreams, then my children's future, then the weight of being the reliable one for relatives who always had requests. For 45 years, I had played my part, faithful, supportive, patient. Then, 2 years ago, death came and took my husband away in the cruelest silence, leaving me with a loneliness that echoed in every corner of our old house. I thought my life was finished. I thought I would spend the rest of my years in that same house where his absence haunted the halls. But something in me refused to let despair be the final chapter. Maybe it was the stubbornness I'd hidden beneath obedience all those years. Maybe it was the tiny flame of independence that had never quite gone out. Or maybe it was God's mercy. That's how I ended up here, in this little country home. My country home. Mine, no one else's. Paid for with the only savings I had managed to scrape together across decades, $5,000, pennies collected from skipped desserts, rejected shopping trips, and denying myself new dresses while my children got theirs. Every small act of restraint had piled into a quiet fortune, and now it had bought me something priceless. A sanctuary. The Titan walls were freshly painted cream, still carrying the faint scent of new wood. The windows framed a view of rolling fields where the morning sun poured like liquid gold. The garden out back was nothing but wild soil and possibilities. But I saw more than weeds. I saw roses, tulips, daisies, and sunflowers swaying in summer. Winds. When I reached out and touched the wall, I swear I felt its heartbeat. Or maybe it was mine, racing with the giddiness of pure freedom. That morning, I ate breakfast at a small wooden table in the kitchen, just bread, butter, and tea. Yet it tasted like a feast. The birds outside sang as if congratulating me, their voices weaving through the open window like ribbons of joy. For the first time in decades, I wasn't cooking for anyone else. I wasn't hurrying to meet someone's schedule. I wasn't serving. I was simply being. As I watered the 2 potted plants I had bought in town yesterday, a violet and a tiny jasmine, I whispered to them like old friends, grow with me, thrive with me. Let's begin again together. I walked barefoot across the wooden floor, the planks cool and honest under my feet. No carpet to hide the floors, no clutter to drown the space, just simplicity, just truth. When I caught my reflection again in the hallway mirror, I stopped. For years I had avoided mirrors because they only reminded me of what time had stolen, the youthful glow, the smooth skin, the bright spark in my eyes. But now I looked longer. Yes, my hair was white. Yes, the lines on my face were deep. Yes, my hands shook with age. But there was something else in that reflection, something that startled me. It was light, a glow that wasn't about youth but about something even stronger. Liberation. I smiled at myself. A small, shy smile at first, but it grew, stretching, into something almost girlish. I whispered out loud, "You did it. You finally did something for yourself." The tears came again, hot and unstoppable. But this time I welcomed them. I let them fall freely, washing away the decades of silence, obedience, and invisibility. Each tear was a goodbye. To the woman who only lived for others, to the widow who thought her story had ended, to the voice that told her she wasn't worthy of dreams. The new me, the woman who had dared to buy her own cottage, who had dared to carve out her sanctuary, stood taller in that mirror. And for the first time in 69 long years, I wasn't afraid of the future. I was ready to live. That night I lay curled on the small sofa in my living room, my back aching from its unforgiving springs. Around me the sounds of strangers echoed through my home, snoring, murmuring, children crying in the night. The chaos had swallowed every corner of the sanctuary I had worked my whole life to build. My house, my only dream, my only freedom. And yet, here I was again, reduced to nothing more than a servant in it. The ceiling above me blurred as tears welled in my eyes. I thought about my husband, about how he used to say, "Mary, you deserve more. One day, you'll finally live for yourself." He had believed in me even when I didn't. And now, 2 years after he was gone, I wondered what he would think if he saw his wife exiled from her own bed, stripped of her dignity by the very people who should have protected her. My mind wandered through memories I had buried. I remembered the day after his funeral, when I needed comfort more than anything. And my daughter, Rebecca, had walked into our apartment with empty boxes, not hugs. "Mum, you don't need all these books. We'll take them. You're too old for this clutter." I had watched helplessly as she carried away my husband's belongings, his watch, his letters, the smell of him still clinging to his sweaters. She didn't ask. She took. I remembered when she asked for money from the sale of my apartment. "You don't know how to invest, Mum. Give it to me, and I'll make it grow." When I refused, she punished me with silence. For weeks, I cried. Into my pillow, aching for her voice, her affection, until finally she returned, not with love, but with another demand. And now, here we were again. The cycle unbroken. She had taken my peace, my food, my money, and even my bed. I turned on my side and looked at the window. Outside, the moonlight bathed my small garden. The potted plants I had placed so lovingly were still there, untouched. For now. I clung to the sight of them, whispering silently, "At least you're still mine." But deep down, I knew they wouldn't survive 2 weeks of wild children trampling them. Nothing I loved ever seemed to survive. By dawn, exhaustion had dragged me into a restless sleep. I woke with pain radiating from my neck and shoulders, a reminder that I was 69 years old, not a young mother anymore. But when I opened my eyes, I didn't see peace. I saw Noah in my kitchen, rummaging through my refrigerator as if it belonged to him. "Where's the cereal?" he asked without looking at me. "I don't have cereal," I replied softly. "What do you mean? How are the kids supposed to eat?" The conversation that followed, his laughter at my 6 eggs, Emily's bag of filthy laundry shoved into my hands, Rebecca's complaints that I wasn't organised, all of it pressed against my chest like a heavy stone. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by people who saw me not as a woman, not as a mother, not even as a human being, but as a resource, a washing machine, a cook, a wallet. And yet, in that suffocating moment, something stirred inside me. It wasn't rage. Rage I knew well. It burned hot, flared up, and left me weak. No, this was different. This was slow, steady, like embers glowing in ashes long thought cold. It was indignation. Indignation that after all I had given, 45 years of sacrifice, endless patience, every penny saved, I was still treated as less than nothing. As I washed Emily's baby clothes in scalding water, my hands shaking, I whispered to myself, "This cannot go on." But then the voices of guilt crept in. "They're your family. A mother never says no. You'll die alone if you push them away." I clutched the damp fabric tighter. Was that true? Was family about sacrifice at any cost? Was love measured by how much you could endure without complaint, or had I been lied to all along? I thought back to my youth before marriage, when I would sit in the library for hours devouring novels, dreaming of travelling, painting, writing. I had wanted a life filled with beauty. But those dreams had been shelved the moment I became a wife, then a mother. One responsibility after another, until there was no room left for Mary, the girl who once dreamed. Now, staring at a sink full of baby clothes that weren't mine, I realised the cruel truth. I had lived everyone's life but my own. That night, as I listened to Rebecca and David laughing in my bedroom, the bedroom I had chosen so carefully, the bed I had saved for, the garden view I had longed for, I felt the last fragile thread inside me stretch to breaking. But this time, I would. Not let it snap silently. This time something inside me whispered, Enough. It was a tiny word, barely audible, but it carried the weight of every year I had spent ignored, dismissed and used. It carried my husband's voice, reminding me I deserved better. It carried my own soul, battered but not destroyed, rising, up from the ashes of decades. Enough. And for the first time in a very long time I believed it. The next morning, dawn crept into the cottage with a quiet beauty that should have filled me with joy. Instead, it arrived like an intruder, dragging me into another day of servitude. My back ached from the sofa, my eyes burned from sleeplessness, and my heart carried a heaviness that words couldn't describe. By the time I shuffled into the kitchen, Noah was already there, opening my refrigerator as if he lived here. "Mary, where's the cereal?" he asked without so much as a glance in my direction. I told him gently that I didn't have any. His laughter was sharp. "No cereal? 6 eggs for 20 people? You'd better go shopping again. The kids will be hungry soon." Emily came in. Next, the baby fussing in her arms. Without greeting, she thrust a bag of soiled clothes into my hands. "He had an accident. Wash these today, and boil water for the bottles." I stared at the bundle, heavy with the stench of another person's responsibility. Something twisted inside me. My hands shook, not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of decades of being expected to say yes. Rebecca floated down the stairs from my room, where she had slept comfortably while I twisted in pain on the sofa. Her voice was brisk, businesslike. "Mum, you need to get more organised. We can't live like this. You should write a proper list and go to town today. Dad doesn't like to wait for breakfast." Behind her came David, grinning as though this were his vacation home. "Mother-in-law," he chimed. "Don't forget cigarettes, beer and some good meat for a barbecue. We're thinking of inviting more family this weekend. Make it a real gathering. A real gathering. At my expense. With my money. In my home." The spark inside me, small and fragile until now, flared into something stronger. I wanted to scream, to slam my fists on the counter, to throw them all out. But instead, I did something more dangerous. I smiled. "All right," I said, softly. "I'll go to town. Make a list of what you want." Rebecca's lips curved with triumph, certain she had bent me once again. But she didn't know that in that moment, the ground had shifted. Because I wasn't going to the supermarket first. I was going to the lawyer's office I'd noticed in town the day before. The drive into town was the most liberating journey I had taken in years. The silence of the car was intoxicating. No voices barking orders, no children clamouring, no one treating me like a servant. Just me, the road, and the quiet thrum of possibility. I stopped first at a small cafe. For once, I ordered a cup of coffee not for anyone else but for myself. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and let the bitterness ground me. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, tilted her head. "You look troubled, Ma'am," she said gently. I smiled sadly. "Let's just say I'm drowning in family obligations." Her expression softened, knowing. "Sometimes the ones closest to us are the ones who hurt us most." Her words sank into me like a stone falling into water, rippling outward. That was it. That was my truth. The law office was small but dignified. The sign outside read, "Jeremy Stone, Attorney at Law." My hands trembled as I pushed the door open. A man in his 50s greeted me with warmth. "Good morning, Ma'am. How can I help you?" I sat down across from him, clutching my purse like a lifeline. "I need advice about my family." For the next hour, I spilled everything. From Rebecca's phone call demanding I host 20 people, to the endless list of expenses, to the humiliation of being banished to my own sofa. I told him about my dwindling savings, the manipulation, the guilt trips. He listened without interruption, his pen scratching notes, his brow furrowing in sympathy. When I finally stopped, my voice hoarse, Jeremy leaned forward. "Mrs. Albright, what you've described is abuse. Financial, Emotional and psychological. Family or not, no one has the right to exploit you. The word abuse stunned me. I had always told myself it was duty, sacrifice, love, but hearing it labelled for what it was. My chest tightened, not in fear, but in recognition. You own your house, Jeremy continued. You decide who enters and under what conditions. If they refuse to respect that, legally, it's trespassing. Trespassing? But they're my daughter, my in-laws. Family doesn't grant immunity from the law, he said firmly. And you're not obligated to provide food and lodging for free. You can set terms, commercial terms if you wish. In fact, you'd be well within your rights to charge them the same as any guest house would. The thought was dizzying. Me, charging them. My Rebecca, her husband's proud family. But then again, wasn't that exactly what they expected of me, to provide everything without question? Jeremy slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a draft contract, rates per room, per meal, per service. A clear professional declaration that my generosity had limits. I touched the paper as though it were gold. For the first time in years, I felt power within my grasp. Before leaving town, I stopped at the bank. The numbers confirmed what I already knew. In less than 2 days, I had spent more than $500 on these uninvited guests. At this rate, I would be penniless in a week. The young banker looked at me kindly. Mrs. Albright, you're being drained. You need to protect yourself. We can even set spending alerts if you'd like. Protect myself. The phrase repeated in my head all the way back to the cottage. But first, I stopped at the supermarket, not to fill carts with beer and barbecue meat, but to buy the bare essentials: rice, beans, pasta. Enough so no one starved, but no luxuries, no indulgence. $50, that was all. When I returned, they were waiting like wolves circling prey. Mum, where were you? The kids are starving, Rebecca snapped. Where's the beer? David demanded. And the cigarettes? Robert added. I set the bags on, the counter calmly. I bought rice and beans, that's all. The room fell silent, a stunned quiet that vibrated with disbelief. What do you mean that's all? Noah barked. I mean, I have no more money for luxuries, only basics. Rebecca's face flushed. We know you have savings. Stop being stingy. My hands trembled as I reached into my purse, not with fear, but with resolve. I pulled out the folder from Jeremy's office and laid it on the table. This, I said, my voice steady, is a contract. From now on, if you wish to stay here, you will contribute $100 per room per night, $50 per person per day for meals, $20 per day for utilities. So far, in 2 days, the total is $2,800. Their jaws dropped. Protests erupted, shouts of betrayal, accusations of greed, emotional blackmail. Rebecca's voice rose above them all. Dad would be rolling in his grave if he saw you charging your own family. But for once, her words didn't pierce me. I stood taller, straighter, stronger. Your father loved me. He would never have allowed his family to treat me like a servant in my own home. I will not dishonour his memory by allowing this abuse to continue. The room erupted into chaos, but inside me, there was only stillness. Because, for the first time in years, I wasn't the victim. I was the woman of this house, and I had found my voice. The room exploded with voices. You've lost your mind, David roared. You're choosing money over family, Rebecca shrieked, her face red with fury. This isn't you, Mary, Emily sobbed, cradling her baby as if I had threatened to throw them out into the streets. But as they raged, I stood in the centre of my living room, calm, still, and strangely at peace. Their words, once sharp enough to slice through me, now fell harmlessly against a shield I hadn't realised I was capable of building. Because I knew the truth. This wasn't about money. This was about respect. And for the first time in my life, I demanded it. Rebecca's voice cut above the chaos. Mum, how dare you do this? We're your family. We came here to spend time with you. Don't you see? You're pushing us away. Dad would never forgive you for this. I looked at my daughter, the child I had carried, fed, clothed and sacrificed for, the one who had once held my hand with innocence, who had called me her hero. My heart ached with a grief far deeper than anger, but I no longer bowed to guilt. Your father loved me, I said firmly, my eyes locked on hers. He would never have wanted me treated like a servant. He would have told you to honour me, to protect me, not to exploit me. Rebecca blinked, startled by the steel in my voice. But before she could answer, the front door creaked open. Martha, my neighbour, stepped in, carrying a basket of vegetables. Her timing was heaven sent. "Oh my," she said, scanning the tense faces and the papers spread across the table. "Looks like a family meeting." "It's none of your business," David snapped, but Martha's eyes twinkled with quiet wisdom. "Family or not, I've lived long enough to know when someone's being taken advantage of. 20 people staying. Here without paying a cent. That's not love, that's leeching." Her words hit like thunder. My relatives shifted uneasily, suddenly aware that a stranger could see through them. Paul, ever the diplomat, tried to smooth things over. "Mary, let's be reasonable. We'll give you $200, that's fair." Martha nearly dropped her basket. 200? For 20 people, 2 weeks? Honey, the cheapest motel in town would charge you more for one night. Shame on you. I almost laughed, the absurdity of it all laid bare. "No," I said softly but firmly. "You have 3 choices. Sign the contract and pay for your stay, buy your own lodging in town, or leave now, but I will no longer feed, house and clean for people who don't respect me." The silence that followed was deafening. Rebecca's lips trembled. "You're destroying this family, Mom." "No," I whispered, my eyes wet but unwavering. "I'm saving myself." The shouting began again, louder this time, a desperate storm of guilt and threats. Emily cried dramatically about her baby. Robert muttered about how ungrateful I was. Noah barked about how ridiculous it was to charge blood. But then, one by one, they realised something had shifted. The old Mary would have caved by now. She would have apologised, cried, begged forgiveness, agreed to anything just to keep the peace. This Mary didn't flinch. I stood tall in my wrinkled dress, my tired hands gripping the contract, my heart pounding with both fear and triumph. I was no longer begging for scraps of love. I was demanding dignity, and they couldn't handle it. "Pack your things," David finally snapped, his voice hard with wounded pride. "We're leaving," Rebecca gasped. "What? Where will we go?" "Anywhere," he growled. "I won't. Stay in a house where I'm treated like a stranger." I almost smiled at the irony. Treated like a stranger? He had treated me like a servant. They began to pack, slamming doors, stomping up and down the stairs. The children cried, confused, their innocence caught in the crossfire. My heart ached for them, but I reminded myself, this wasn't their fault. This was the result of their parents' choices. As they loaded their suitcases into the cars, Rebecca lingered by the door. Her eyes were red, her voice trembling. "You'll regret this, Mom. When you're sick, when you're lonely, when you have no one, don't come running to us." I looked at her with all the love I still carried, but none of the weakness. I would rather be alone with peace than surrounded by people who use me. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Finally, with a huff, she turned and left. The engines roared to life. One by one, the cars disappeared down the road, their dust rising into the golden evening light. And then, silence. Beautiful, glorious silence. I stood in my doorway, the wind brushing my face, and for the first time in weeks, I breathed deeply. The air tasted like freedom. That evening, Martha returned with a warm pot of chicken stew. We ate together, on my porch, watching the sunset paint the fields in hues of orange and pink. "You were brave," she said softly. "Not everyone has the strength to set boundaries, especially with family." "I wasn't brave," I admitted. "I was desperate. I had nothing left to give." Martha smiled knowingly. "Sometimes desperation is the seed of courage. You did the right thing. I sipped my tea, my eyes fixed on the stars beginning to appear. I feel lighter, as if I finally remembered who I am. Exactly, Martha said. And now you get to decide what comes next. 6 months later, my cottage truly became mine. The garden bloomed with roses and sunflowers. I joined a painting class at the community centre. I hosted tea with neighbours who brought pies and laughter instead of demands. Rebecca called occasionally, usually when she needed something. At first I struggled, my old habits clawing at me, whispering, "Say yes, you'll lose her if you don't," but I stayed firm. "I'm sorry, my love," I would say gently. "I can't help with that." And slowly, the calls grew less frequent. Painful, yes, but freeing too, because I had learned the hardest, most beautiful truth of my life. Love is not proven by how much you allow yourself to be used. Generosity is not measured by how much of yourself you give away. And dignity is not a gift from others. It's a choice you make for yourself. This morning, as the birds sang and the sun lit up my little kitchen, I brewed a cup of coffee just for me. I carried it out to my porch, where the wind danced through. My flowers. I smiled, tears of joy warming my eyes. For the first time in 69 years, my life was mine. And oh, how sweet freedom tasted.